Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the Terra Nova and watched the stars move past. He had been doing this job for 15 years now. His ship traveled from one star system to another, helping alien races solve their problems without fighting. It was good work, but sometimes he wondered if other species really understood humans at all. The Terra Nova was not like other ships in space. It was big, but not because it carried weapons. It was big because it carried meeting rooms, hospitals, and places where different alien species could sit together and talk. Jake's job was to help them find peace instead of war. Dr. Lisa Park walked onto the bridge carrying her datapad. She was the ship's doctor, but she also studied how different alien species lived and thought. Lisa had learned to speak 12 different alien languages. She could eat food that would make most humans sick, and she understood customs that seemed very strange to people from Earth. The Zephyrians and the Korath are ready to meet, Lisa told Jake. Both sides agreed to your terms. No weapons in the meeting room, no more than 5 representatives each, and they will listen to our ideas for solving their border dispute. Jake nodded. The Zephyrians and Korath had been fighting over the same star systems for 30 years. Thousands of soldiers from both sides had died in space battles. Trade routes had been destroyed. Innocent people living on planets caught between the two empires had suffered greatly. 3 months ago, both sides had asked humans to help solve the problem. This happened a lot. When alien species could not agree, they called for human mediators. Humans had a reputation in the galaxy. They were known as the species that could find peaceful solutions to any conflict. Commander Troy Baker entered the bridge. He was Jake's military advisor, though the Terra Nova rarely needed military advice. Troy had fought in the last real war humans had been involved in, over 20 years ago. Sometimes Jake caught Troy looking at star charts with a worried expression, as if he was planning for battles that might never come. "Sir, I have concerns about this meeting," Troy said. "Our intelligence reports show that both the Zephyrians and Korath have been building up their fleets, more ships than they need just to fight each other." Jake looked at Troy with interest. "What are you thinking?" "I think they might be preparing for something bigger. Maybe they plan to work together against someone else after we help them solve their border problem." Lisa shook her head. "That does not make sense, Troy. These two species hate each other. They have been enemies for generations. Their cultures are completely different. Zephyrians value honor and direct combat. Korath prefer strategy and long-term planning. They could never work together." Ambassador Kate Sullivan joined the conversation. Kate was the best negotiator Jake had ever worked with. She could sit in a room with angry alien leaders for hours and somehow get them to agree on things they had been fighting about for years. Kate had a gift for understanding what different species really wanted, even when they could not explain it themselves. "The meeting room is ready," Kate said. "I have studied both cultures carefully. I think I know what each side really wants. The Zephyrians want respect and recognition of their military strength. The Korath want security and guaranteed access to trade routes. We can give both sides what they need." Jake trusted Kate completely. In 5 years of working together, she had never failed to find a peaceful solution to any conflict. Other species in the galaxy often said that humans were lucky to have such skilled diplomats. Jake knew it was not luck. Humans worked hard to understand other species and find ways for everyone to benefit. The meeting began 2 hours later. Jake watched from the observation deck as representatives from both species sat around a large circular table. The Zephyrians were tall and thin, with blue skin and sharp features. They wore military uniforms covered in medals and honors. The Korath were shorter and broader, with gray skin and large eyes. They wore simple robes, but Jake knew their simple appearance hid very intelligent minds. Kate sat between the two groups. She spoke in careful, respectful tones. She explained how the disputed star systems could be divided fairly. She showed how both sides could benefit from increased trade. She suggested ways for both species to maintain their pride while giving up their claims to fight. For 3 days, the negotiations continued. Jake watched alien leaders who had been enemies for decades slowly begin to listen to each other. Kate helped them understand that they had more in common than they realized. Both species wanted security for their people. Both wanted their cultures to be respected. Both wanted to prosper and grow. On the fourth day, something amazing happened. The Zephyrian military commander and the Korath trade minister shook hands. They agreed to end 30 years of war. They would divide the disputed systems peacefully. They would open new trade routes that would benefit both species. Jake felt proud as he watched the ceremony. This was why humans traveled the galaxy. This was why they spent so much time and energy helping other species solve their problems. Peace was always better than war, but Jake did not know that in a secret meeting room on a distant space station, representatives from 12 different alien species were watching recordings of the human negotiations. These aliens called themselves the Apex Coalition. They had been watching humans for years and they were not impressed. "Look how weak they are," said one alien leader. "They always give in. They always compromise. They never use their strength to take what they want." "Humans have powerful ships and advanced technology," said another. "But they waste it on helping others instead of conquering them. This makes them dangerous to the natural order of the galaxy. Other species are starting to think humans are better leaders than we are," said a third. "This cannot continue. We must show the galaxy that strength, not diplomacy, is what matters." The coalition began making plans. They would teach humans and the rest of the galaxy an important lesson about power. They would show everyone that peace was just weakness in disguise. Jake Morrison stood on his bridge, proud of another successful mission, completely unaware that his species had just made very dangerous enemies. Lieutenant Sam Rodriguez was 24 years old and had been in space for only 2 years. He served on the patrol ship Starlight, which protected human trade routes in the Outer Rim systems. Sam thought his job was boring most of the time. Pirates rarely attacked human ships anymore, and when they did, they usually ran away as soon as they saw human patrol vessels approaching. That changed on a Tuesday morning when Sam received an emergency signal from the cargo ship, Pacific Dream. The signal was weak and full of static, but Sam could hear the fear in the captain's voice. "This is Pacific Dream requesting immediate assistance. We are under attack by unknown vessels. They are not responding to our surrender signals. They are destroying everything." Sam's captain, Maria Santos, immediately ordered the Starlight to jump to hyperspace. They arrived at the Pacific Dream's location 30 minutes later, but they were too late. The cargo ship was nothing but floating pieces of metal and debris. There were no survivors. Sam stared at his scanner readings in confusion. "Captain, this doesn't make sense. The Pacific Dream was carrying medical supplies and food to the colony on Henderson's World. Why would pirates destroy a humanitarian cargo ship?" Captain Santos studied the wreckage carefully. "Pirates want to steal cargo, not destroy it. This looks like something else entirely." 3 weeks later, Chief Engineer Maya Thompson was working late in her laboratory on the research station Alpha 7. Maya was one of the smartest people in the human fleet. She could look at scattered pieces of information and see patterns that others missed. Tonight, she was studying reports from 12 different attacks on human ships and colonies over the past 6 months. Maya spread the reports across her desk and began connecting the dots. The attacks all looked random at first glance, but Maya noticed something strange. Each attack had been perfectly planned. The attackers knew exactly when human ships would be traveling alone. They knew which colonies had the weakest defenses. They knew where human patrol ships would be stationed. Maya called Dr. Alex Chen, who worked at the Colonial Defense Analysis Center on Earth. Alex studied military tactics and strategy. If anyone could help Maya understand these attack patterns, it would be him. "Alex, I need you to look at something," Maya said when he answered her call. "These pirate attacks on our people are not random. Someone is giving the attackers detailed information about our movements and defenses." Dr. Chen was quiet for a long moment. "Send me everything you have. I'll run the data through our analysis computers and see what patterns emerge." 2 days. Later, Alex called Maya back. His voice was grim. "You were right to be suspicious. These attacks show coordination between multiple alien species. The attack ships use different technologies that come from at least 6 different star systems. Someone is organizing this. Maya felt a cold chill run down her spine. But why would different alien species work together to attack us? Most of them have been enemies with each other for centuries. I don't know, Alex replied. But I think we need to warn the colonial authorities. These attacks are getting more frequent and more violent. The warning came too late for the people living on Kepler 442b. The colony there was home to 15,000 humans who had spent 20 years turning a barren planet into a garden world. They grew food that fed 3 other human colonies. They had built schools, hospitals, and parks. Children played in streets lined with earth trees that had been carefully transported across the galaxy. The attack began at dawn on a Thursday. 47 ships appeared in orbit around Kepler 442b without warning. The colonists sent out emergency signals begging for help, explaining that they were civilians with no military defenses. The attacking ships did not respond to any communications. They began bombing the colony's cities methodically, starting with the spaceport to prevent anyone from escaping. Then they destroyed the schools and hospitals. Finally, they bombed the residential areas where families lived. When human rescue ships arrived 18 hours later, they found a dead world. Over 10,000 colonists had been killed. The survivors were badly injured and traumatized. Many were children who had watched their parents die. Captain Jake Morrison arrived on Kepler 442b 3 days after the attack. He walked through the ruins of the colony's main city and tried to understand what had happened. The destruction was not random. The attackers had specifically targeted places where civilians gathered. They had destroyed a children's playground. They had bombed a hospital that had been treating sick children. Dr. Lisa Park was with Jake, helping to treat the survivors. She had worked in war zones before, but she had never seen anything like this. Jake, this was not done for money or territory. This was done to cause maximum suffering. Jake felt a growing anger in his chest, but he pushed it down. Humans were peacekeepers. They solved problems through negotiation and compromise. Getting angry would not help the survivors or prevent future attacks. Jake called a meeting of the Galactic Council to present evidence of the coordinated attacks. He brought recordings of the assault on Kepler 442b. He showed data that proved multiple alien species were working together. He asked for help in finding and stopping the attackers. The council members listened politely, but Jake could see that many of them were not taking him seriously. Council Chairman Vextar, a tall alien with purple skin and 4 arms, spoke for the group. Captain Morrison, we understand your concern about these pirate attacks. However, space is dangerous, and sometimes civilian settlements become targets. We cannot investigate every raid by lawless groups. Jake stood up slowly. Chairman, over 15,000 human civilians have been murdered in the past 6 months. This is not ordinary piracy. Someone is organizing systematic attacks against my people. The council will consider your request for an investigation, Vextar replied dismissively. However, we have many pressing matters to address. We cannot prioritize human concerns above those of other species. Jake left the council meeting feeling frustrated and confused. For 50 years, humans had helped solve the problems of dozens of alien species. They had prevented wars, established trade agreements, and saved countless lives. Now, when humans needed help, the same species were turning their backs. Commander Troy Baker was waiting for Jake when he returned to the Terra Nova. Troy's expression was grim, and he carried a data pad filled with intelligence reports. Sir, I have been analyzing the attacks with Maya Thompson and Dr. Chen. We now have proof that at least 12 different alien species are involved in what they call the Apex Coalition. 3 of those species have representatives on the Galactic Council. Jake sat down heavily in his command chair. So the Council is not ignoring our request for help. They are actively working against us. It appears so, sir. The Coalition believes that humans have become too influential in galactic affairs. They think our peaceful methods make us weak and dangerous to what they call the natural order. Jake was quiet for a long time. Finally, he asked, Troy, how many more colonies do we have in remote systems with minimal defenses? 47. Sir? Jake closed his eyes and tried to think of a diplomatic solution. There had to be a way to negotiate with the Coalition. There had to be a way to make them understand that humans only wanted peace for everyone. But deep in his heart, Jake was beginning to realize that some people only understood one kind of language, and humans had been speaking the wrong language for far too long. Admiral Grace Mitchell had been retired for 8 years when the emergency call came. She was 72 years old and spent her days gardening on a quiet farm on Earth. Grace had commanded human fleets during the last major war, 23 years ago. She thought those days were behind her forever. The call came from Earth's president at 3 in the morning. Grace answered her communication device and saw the president's worried face on the screen. "Grace, we need you back. Something terrible is happening to our colonies and our diplomatic efforts are failing. The situation is getting worse every day." Grace listened as the president explained about the coalition attacks and the betrayal at the Galactic Council. She felt old anger stirring in her chest, but she kept her voice calm. "Mr. President, I have been out of active service for 8 years. Are you sure there is no one else who can handle this situation?" "Grace, you are the only military commander still alive who has experience fighting multiple alien species at once. Our current officers are trained for peacekeeping, not war. We need someone who understands how to win battles." Grace was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Give me 24 hours to think about it." That same day, Sergeant Kyle Davis was leading a rescue mission to the colony on New Geneva. The colony was known throughout the galaxy as a center for learning and healing. It had the best children's hospital in human space, and a university where young people from many different species came to study together. Kyle's transport ship arrived at New Geneva just as the attack was ending. From space, he could see fires burning across the planet's surface. The beautiful city that had taken 30 years to build was being destroyed in a single day. Kyle's team landed near what had been the university campus. The buildings were still burning. Kyle had been a soldier for 12 years, but he had never seen destruction like this. The attackers had not just bombed the buildings. They had gone inside and killed people one by one. Kyle found the children's hospital completely destroyed. The attackers had bombed it first before the children could be evacuated. Kyle stood in the ruins and counted small bodies, babies who would never grow up, children who had been sick and helpless, murdered in their beds. Dr. Emma Stone was with Kyle's rescue team. She was a psychologist who studied how people reacted to extreme trauma. Emma had come to help the survivors. But when she saw what had happened at New Geneva, she realized something important about the attackers' strategy. "Kyle, look at what they targeted," Emma said as they walked through the destroyed city. "They hit the hospital first, then the schools, then the university. They were not trying to capture territory or steal resources. They were trying to break our spirit." Kyle nodded grimly. "They wanted us to see this. They wanted us to know that they could kill our children whenever they wanted." The coalition had made sure that news of the New Geneva attack spread across the galaxy quickly. They broadcast recordings of the burning hospital and destroyed schools. They sent messages to other species saying that this was what happened to civilizations that tried to change the natural order of the galaxy. When the news reached Earth, something unprecedented happened. For 72 hours, humanity went completely silent. Every diplomatic mission stopped. Every trade negotiation ended. Every peacekeeping operation was suspended. Human ships returned to their home bases without explanation. The galaxy had never experienced anything like it. For over 50 years, humans had been constantly talking, negotiating, helping, and mediating. Suddenly, there was nothing but silence from every human world and ship. Admiral Mitchell came out of retirement and was given command of all human military forces. Her first order was to recall every human diplomat, trader, and peacekeeper from alien space. Her second order was to activate military protocols that had not been used in over 20 years. Captain Jake Morrison was recalled from his diplomatic mission and summoned to a meeting on Earth. When he arrived at military headquarters, he found a very different atmosphere than he was used to. The building was full of officers he had never seen before. Everyone moved with military precision. No one was talking about negotiation or compromise. Jake was brought to a conference room where Admiral Mitchell was waiting with other senior commanders. Grace looked older than Jake remembered, but her eyes were sharp and focused. "Captain Morrison, you have done excellent work as a diplomat," Grace said. "But the time for diplomacy is over. I am reassigning you to military command. We are going to war." Jake felt confused. "Admiral, surely there must be some way to negotiate with the coalition. If we can understand what they really want, we might be able to find a peaceful solution." Grace stood up and activated a wall screen that showed images from New Geneva. Jake saw the destroyed hospital, the burned schools, and the small bodies of murdered children. "Captain, they killed babies in their hospital beds. They broadcast recordings of dead children to frighten other species. These are not people who can be reasoned with." Jake stared at the images and felt something change inside him. For 15 years, he had believed that every conflict could be solved through understanding and compromise. He had thought that all thinking beings wanted peace if they could find a way to achieve it with honor. But the people who did this to New Geneva were not interested in honor or peace. They understood only one thing. Commander Troy Baker entered the conference room carrying classified military files. Troy looked different than Jake had ever seen him. His usual worried expression had been replaced by cold determination. "Admiral, I have completed the strategic analysis you requested. The coalition has 14 major military bases and approximately 2,000 combat ships. They believe they have us outnumbered 3-1. Grace smiled for the first time since Jake had arrived. It was not a pleasant smile. "They do not understand humans very well, do they, Troy? They think because we choose peace, we are incapable of war. They think because we show mercy, we are weak. They have made a very serious mistake." Jake realized that something fundamental had changed in human leadership. The people in this room were not the diplomatic peacekeepers he had worked with for years. They were something much older and more dangerous. "What are our orders, Admiral?" Jake asked. Grace looked at each officer in the room before answering. "Gentlemen, for 50 years we have been the galaxy's peacekeepers. We have prevented wars, saved lives, and tried to build a better future for all species. The coalition has decided that our peaceful nature makes us weak and dangerous to their idea of natural order." Grace paused and looked directly at Jake. "They are about to learn the difference between choosing not to fight and being unable to fight. They wanted to see human weakness. Instead, they are going to discover what humans are truly capable of when we stop holding back." The meeting ended with orders that would have been unthinkable just days before. Human colonies were to be evacuated and fortified. Hidden military installations were to be activated. Weapon systems that had been stored in secret for decades were to be prepared for deployment. But most importantly, humanity's true military capabilities were finally going to be revealed to a galaxy that had badly misjudged what they were dealing with. The coalition had succeeded in making humans angry. They were about to discover that this was the last thing they should have wanted. General Pete Williams stood in the command center of the secret military base on Europa, one of Jupiter's moons. The base had been hidden beneath the ice for 30 years, waiting for a day that everyone hoped would never come. Today, that day, had arrived. Pete looked at the massive screens showing star charts and fleet positions across the galaxy. Red dots marked coalition military bases. Blue dots showed human colonies that needed protection. Green dots represented something the coalition knew nothing about: hidden human military assets that had been quietly positioned throughout the galaxy for decades. Captain Zoe Campbell walked into the command center wearing a black flight suit. That looked different from any uniform the galaxy had seen before. Zoe was 31 years old and had been training in secret military programs since she was 18. She commanded a squadron of ships that officially did not exist. "General, the Shadow Fleet is ready for deployment," Zoe reported. "All pilots are in position and waiting for your orders." Pete nodded. "Captain, you and your pilots are about to show the galaxy what human engineering can really accomplish. The coalition thinks they know our capabilities because they have seen our diplomatic and cargo ships. They have never seen our warships." Major Rick Turner joined them at the command table. Rick was a quiet man who rarely spoke, but when he did, people listened carefully. He commanded human special forces units that had been training for situations exactly like this one. "Sir, My teams are in position near all primary coalition command centers, Rick reported. We have been watching their leaders for months. We know their daily routines, their security measures, and their weaknesses. When you give the order, we can eliminate their entire command structure within hours. Pete studied the tactical displays for a moment. Admiral Mitchell had given him complete authority to conduct military operations against the coalition. The orders were simple: end the threat to human civilians by any means necessary. Gentlemen, the coalition made a critical error in judgment. They attacked our children because they thought it would make us surrender. Instead, they have given us complete moral justification for what we are about to do. The first strike began at exactly midnight, Galactic Standard Time. Captain Campbell led 12 human ships in an attack on the coalition's largest military base. The base was located in the Zarian system and was protected by over 200 coalition warships. The coalition defenders were confident. They had humans outnumbered 20-1. They had stronger shields and more powerful weapons than any human ship they had ever seen. They expected an easy victory. They were wrong about everything. Campbell's ships appeared on the coalition sensors as small, fast vessels. The coalition commanders laughed and prepared to destroy them quickly. Then the human ships did something impossible. They passed directly through the coalition's shields as if the shields were not there. The technology was called phase manipulation, and humans had been developing it in secret for 15 years. Human ships could shift into a different dimension, pass through any barrier, and then return to normal space inside enemy defenses. The coalition base was destroyed in 17 minutes. 200 coalition warships were eliminated without destroying a single human vessel. The attack was so fast and precise that nearby coalition forces did not even have time to send a distress signal. Similar attacks began happening across the galaxy. Coalition military bases that had seemed invincible were being destroyed by small groups of human ships that appeared from nowhere, struck with devastating efficiency, and disappeared before reinforcements could arrive. Major Turner's Special Forces teams began the second phase of the operation. While the coalition military was trying to understand how their bases were being destroyed, their political and military leaders began disappearing. The coalition had made their leadership easy to find because they were proud and arrogant. They lived in luxury and appeared in public regularly to show their power. Turner's teams had been watching them for months, learning their habits and waiting for the right moment. Coalition Admiral Zekthor was giving a speech about human weakness when Turner's team struck. The Admiral was addressing 10,000 coalition soldiers, explaining how humans would soon be forced to surrender. He never finished the speech. Turner's soldiers appeared inside the heavily guarded auditorium as if they had materialized from thin air. They used the same phase technology as the ships, allowing them to pass through walls and security barriers. Zekthor was eliminated before his guards even realized they were under attack. The same thing happened to coalition leaders across 12 different star systems. Military commanders, political leaders, and strategic planners disappeared one by one. The coalition's chain of command collapsed within days. Dr. Lisa Park worked in the medical stations that treated coalition prisoners. She wanted to understand why they had chosen to target human children. When she interviewed captured coalition officers, she discovered something disturbing. They truly believed we were weak, Lisa reported to Admiral Mitchell. They saw our peaceful nature as a genetic flaw that made us inferior. They thought they were doing the galaxy a favor by putting us in our proper place. Admiral Mitchell listened to the report with a grim expression. Dr. Park, did any of them show regret for what they did to our children? No, Admiral, they still believe they were justified. They say that strength should rule the galaxy, and that our compassion makes us unfit for leadership. Mitchell was quiet for a moment. Then she said, in that case, we will show them what human strength really looks like. General Williams received new orders that evening. The coalition military had been broken, but their civilian population still supported the war against humans. Coalition news broadcasts continued to call humans weak and promised that the attacks on human colonies would resume soon. Williams activated something called Protocol 7. Human ships began appearing in orbit around every coalition homeworld simultaneously. The ships did not attack immediately. Instead, they broadcast a message in every coalition language. The message was simple. You have 48 hours to surrender unconditionally and turn over everyone responsible for the attacks on human civilians. If you refuse, we will demonstrate the difference between human restraint and human capability. Most coalition worlds surrendered immediately. Their leaders had seen what happened to their military bases and commanders. They understood that humans had been holding back for 50 years, not because they were weak, but because they chose to be peaceful. But 3 coalition worlds refused to surrender. They broadcast defiant messages saying they would never bow to human demands. They called humans cowards who attacked from hiding and challenged them to fight honorably. General Williams gave them what they asked for. The attack on the Korath Prime system lasted exactly 1 hour. 50 human ships faced off against 800 coalition defenders in open combat. The coalition forces used traditional tactics, massive fleets, heavy armor, and overwhelming firepower. The humans used something different. Their ships moved, in perfect coordination, as if controlled by a single mind. They anticipated every coalition move and countered it instantly. Their weapons adapted to enemy defenses in real time, becoming more effective with each shot fired. When the battle ended, all 800 coalition ships had been destroyed. The 50 human ships were undamaged. Captain Campbell stood on the A bridge of her flagship and watched coalition survivors floating in space. Her ships began rescue operations immediately, pulling enemy soldiers from destroyed vessels and providing medical care. A coalition officer who had been rescued asked Campbell why humans were saving their enemies. Campbell looked at him with sad eyes. Because we are still human. We do not enjoy killing even when you force us to do it. We hoped you would be better than this. The coalition's resistance collapsed completely after the Battle of Korath Prime. Seeing their most powerful fleet destroyed so easily, the remaining coalition worlds surrendered within hours. But the galaxy had seen something that changed everything. Humans were not the peaceful weaklings the coalition had believed them to be. They were something far more dangerous, a species that chose restraint over violence, but possessed the capability to destroy anyone who threatened their core values. The message spread quickly through galactic civilization. Humans had been holding back for 50 years. They were not weak. They were not inferior. They were the most powerful military force the galaxy had ever seen, and they had been hiding it behind a mask of diplomacy and compassion. The coalition had wanted to teach the galaxy a lesson about strength. Instead, they had taught everyone a lesson about the difference between choosing peace and being incapable of war. President Nancy Clark stood before the assembled representatives of 43 different alien species. The Great Hall of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. Every species that had remained neutral during the Coalition War was now waiting to hear what humanity planned to do with their overwhelming military power. Nancy was 58 years old and had been Earth's president for 6 years. She had spent most of that time working on peaceful trade agreements and cultural exchange programs. She had never expected to be the leader who would reshape the entire galaxy. The war had ended 3 months ago, but its effects were still being felt everywhere. The Coalition's 12-member species had surrendered completely. Their military forces had been disbanded. Their leaders were in prison or dead. But the galaxy was still afraid of what humans might do next. Commander Ben Lewis sat in the front row of the assembly hall. Ben was 29 years old and represented the new generation of human military officers. Unlike the older commanders who remembered the peaceful decades, Ben had been trained for war from the beginning. He would be one of the leaders who shaped humanity's role in the new galactic order. Nancy began her speech with words that many species had been dreading. Members of the Galactic Council, the Coalition War has ended with complete human victory. Our enemies have been defeated. Their ability to threaten innocent civilians has been permanently removed. The alien representatives shifted nervously in their seats. They expected Nancy to announce the creation of a human empire. They expected demands for tribute and submission. They expected humans to become the new masters of the galaxy. Nancy surprised them. However, humanity has no interest in ruling over other species. We did not fight this war to gain territory or power. We fought to protect innocent lives and to ensure that what happened to our children never happens again. Dr. Julia Martinez was recording every word of the speech from her position near the back of the hall. Julia was a historian who had been documenting the war and its aftermath. She understood that this moment would be remembered for centuries as the day the galaxy learned what kind of rulers humans would become. Nancy continued her speech. Today, I am announcing the creation of the Protection Protocols. These are new rules that will govern military action throughout the galaxy. Any species that targets civilians, children, hospitals, or schools will face immediate intervention by human forces. The Galactic Council chamber erupted in surprised voices. Species that had expected human tyranny were instead hearing about human protection. The protection protocols were not about human dominance. They were about preventing the kind of atrocities that had started the war. The protection protocols will be enforced by the new Galactic Peacekeeping Force, Nancy announced. This force will be commanded by humans but will include volunteers from any species that shares our commitment to protecting innocent life. Commander Lewis stood up when Nancy called his name. He would be the first commander of the Galactic Peacekeeping Force. Ben had studied the mistakes that led to the Coalition War. He was determined to make sure that human military power would be used to prevent future conflicts, not to start them. The former Coalition species faced a different set of consequences. They were required to pay compensation to the families of human civilians who had been killed. They had to accept human oversight of their military forces for the next 50 years. Most importantly, they had to publicly acknowledge what they had done and promise never to target civilians again. The Zephyrian ambassador, Kexavar, stood up to address the assembly. His species had been one of the Coalition's founding members. President Clark, my people accept full responsibility for our actions during the war. We understand now that we misjudged human nature completely. We saw your peaceful methods as weakness. We failed to understand that you were choosing restraint. Kexavar paused and looked around the chamber. We have learned that there is a difference between being unable to fight and choosing not to fight. Humans chose peace for 50 years, and we repaid that choice with attacks on your children. We deserve whatever punishment you decide to give us. Nancy nodded respectfully. Ambassador Kexavar, your people will face consequences for what they did. But those consequences are designed to prevent future wars, not to seek revenge. We want your species to become productive members of galactic civilization, not permanent enemies. Dr. Martinez watched the reactions of different species as Nancy outlined the new galactic order. Some seemed relieved that humans were not seeking domination. Others appeared confused by human mercy toward their former enemies. A few looked almost disappointed that the galaxy's new superpower was not acting like a traditional conqueror. The most important moment of the speech came when Nancy addressed the underlying causes of the Coalition War. For too long, this galaxy has operated under the belief that strength should determine leadership. The Coalition attacked us because they believed that peaceful species were unfit to influence galactic affairs. Nancy's voice became stronger as she continued. We are here to prove that belief wrong. Strength without wisdom leads to tyranny. Power without compassion leads to atrocity. The galaxy needs leaders who understand that true strength comes from protecting those who cannot protect themselves. The minds. New galactic order took shape over the following months. Human ships began patrolling trade routes that had been dangerous for decades. Pirates and raiders found themselves facing opponents with technology they could not understand and military skills they could not match. The protection protocols were tested for the first time when the Vegan Syndicate attempted to invade the peaceful Altair Republic. The Vegans had assumed that humans would not interfere in a conflict between non-human species. Commander Lewis proved them wrong. His peacekeeping fleet arrived in the Altair system within hours of the invasion. The vegan attack force was given a simple choice: withdraw immediately or be destroyed. The vegans chose to withdraw. They had seen what happened to the Coalition and had no desire to test human military capabilities. Admiral Jake Morrison returned to his old job as a diplomat, but with a very different role than before. Jake now served as humanity's representative to species that were learning to live under the protection protocols. His job was to help them understand that human military dominance did not mean human cultural imperialism. Jake visited the Korath homeworld 6 months after the war ended. The Korath had been one of the coalition's most aggressive members, but they were now working hard to rebuild their relationship with humanity. The Korath leader, Prime Minister Zethka, met with Jake in a simple conference room. There were no guards, no weapons, and no formal ceremonies. Just two beings trying to understand each other. "Admiral Morrison," Zethka said, "my people have a question that troubles us greatly. You could rule us completely. You could take our worlds, enslave our population, and use our resources for human benefit. Why do you choose not to do these things?" Jake considered the question carefully before answering. "Prime Minister, ruling through fear and force requires constant vigilance and violence. We would have to spend all our time and energy keeping other species under control. We would rather spend that time and energy building a better galaxy for everyone." Zethka was quiet for a long moment. "We never understood this perspective. In our culture, the strong take what they want from the weak. We could not imagine a species that chose to limit its own power. That is why the war happened," Jake replied. "You mistook our choice for inability. You thought kindness was weakness. Now you know that we were choosing to be kind, not because we had to, but because we wanted to." The conversation ended with something that would have been impossible before the war. Zethka asked if young Korath could study at human universities. He wanted his people to learn from humans, not about military technology, but about the philosophy that made humans choose restraint over domination. Dr. Martinez completed her historical record of the Coalition War 5 years after it ended. Her final entry captured what she believed was the most important lesson of the conflict. The galaxy learned that humans had been the strongest military force for decades, but had hidden that strength behind diplomacy and compassion. When forced to reveal their true capabilities, humans used their power not to conquer, but to protect. They proved that the greatest strength is knowing when not to use it. 10 years after the war, Commander Lewis stood on the observation deck of the peacekeeping station above Earth. He watched ships from dozens of different species docking at the station. Young beings from across the galaxy came to Earth to study human history, culture, and philosophy. A young Zephyrian cadet approached Lewis and asked, "Commander, why did humans wait so long to show their true strength? You could have prevented many wars if other species had known what you were capable of." Lewis looked at the cadet and smiled. "Because we hoped you would all be better than that. We believed that if we showed you a different way to live, you would choose peace over violence. We were wrong about some of you, but we were right about others." The cadet thought about this for a moment. "And now? Now everyone knows that we choose to be peaceful, but we are prepared to fight when innocent lives are threatened. The galaxy is safer because both things are true." Lewis turned